Welcome to another episode of my podcast. That's Fun With Me. Today is going to be interesting. A couple of years ago, I was super interested into a topic of plague, and this was caused by another plague we had, coronavirus. And I was like, okay, so what is it about plague and how did it start? What was the reasons and the causes? What happened later? And then I came across a really interesting fact, though I don't really find this in many other sources, especially English, American sources. Historically, probably not proven, but I guess this was one of the causes of a witch hunt. And let's start with something innocent when it really happened. I guess the witch hunt started in like 14th century, and then maybe it led up to the 17th century. And the reason is quite obvious. Church was one of the sources that was spreading the rumors, I guess, that all the women or even some men, they are witches because they do this and that. And of course, we know witches from different sources as well, but for now, we don't really consider them as something bad and crazy. It used to be like years and years ago. But let's start with the Black Death or plague itself. So the date of the Black Death, it starts with like maybe early 14th century, 1331 when it started. And it started from China and then moved across the sea and all over the world, I'd say. Coronavirus started China and plague started basically China. But it's not the point of today's video. I guess in the future podcast, we can talk about plague itself, how it started, what was the reasons, and the so on and so forth. But for now, I want to talk about witches. And of course, Black Death affected the world tremendously, especially political system, and it affected social life and psychological aspects of life. And of course, people were religious back then, and of course everyone believed in God, and church was thriving back then. And do you remember the switch between religious? The first one that we believed in many gods, and this was ancient Greece, ancient, I guess, Russia, or we called it Rus, as well as some other small countries that they believed in many gods. And then it changed into one religion, the one that can be different in every country. We have Muslims, we have Christians, we have all sorts of religions and Buddha itself, but mainly it is focusing on one God in particular. And what is so interesting about this is just in all of this religious, the God is a man. So it's not a woman, and it's not cherished as it used to be in many God religion. It's basically something that shows us men wanted to create a patriarchy, and that is the main reason they created a religion based on men as being the source of life and wisdom and to be considered, I guess. And of course, when the plague ended, I guess this is my view and a couple more sources that I found, that when the plague ended and it was on and off from 14th to 17th century, people were exhausted, of course, and they prayed, they believed in God, and they were super faithful, and they thought if they would be faithful enough, then plague will not touch them and will not kill their family. But now we know the reasons behind plague, but for now we know that it's not a religious purpose. So basically what people believed in crashed and blew up in their faces. So they were questioning religion, they were questioning church itself, like I prayed but still my relatives died, or like I prayed but I still died. And that really shifted the whole society and what they believed in. And of course, church wanted to improve their power even more, and they felt like it. And that's why they started sort of spreading the rumors, not even rumors, but they're spreading the belief that you have to be considerate, and if you're a witch, and they actually said what was defining a witch, someone who is I don't know, like has ugly face, or someone who has rotten teeth, or someone with some problems with their skin, like sore skin, as well as if they have no crops, if there were some other issues, quite normal nowadays. And we understand that there might be hormones, there might be dirt, there's something else behind that. But church was like, so if you're not a Christian, then you would probably have these problems. And if you're not attending church once a week, and if you're not religious enough, then you're probably a witch. And they did believe in a witchcraft. And of course, people were very superstitious about certain facts, and most of the time, women were considered to be a witch, but it was like maybe 70 or 80% of these accused people. But maybe 20%, 30% of accused were men. And most of the countries that actually had the, let's say, believe in warlocks and that men are witches, this was Russia, Iceland, Normandy, and Estonia. These four countries, they had a little bit higher percentage of warlocks as they thought they were. And of course, there were numerous types of indications how to define, not even define, but how to find a witch. Those were stupid, and most of this, it has nothing to do with the real witchcraft. But it's so interesting, right? Before the 13th century, maybe early 13th century, people did believe in witches, but most of the time it was like potions and maybe some innocent spells, and people didn't really think of witches something bad. They were like good witches. And then when in 1208, some, I guess, group of radicals, or I don't know how to call them, heretics. The name is Cathars. They attacked Pope Innocent III. The church started this huge machine of like accusing people and being a witch because they did not support church and they did not consider this as something important. And of course, in most of these countries, people believed that witches were not only evil, but they communicated with the devil, and they had some deals and pacts with the devil, and that caused the rotting of their soul, and then later on the rotting of their image as like sore skin and rotten teeth. And people, they did believe that witches were eating babies. They were going to some forest and having some Sabbath. So they had a Sabbath in the forest most of the time during some moon, once in blue moon or red moon. I have no idea, blood moon basically. And people, they did believe it. But before, I guess, 14th century, it was more or less innocent. If you were accused in this sort of rituals in a witchcraft, you could have been banished from a society or from your own, family, or you could pay a fine, which is reasonable, I guess, in some cases, because like you're a witch, then pay for this witchcraft. And later on, only later, I guess, throughout these centuries and the influence of still church and this plague and like whatever I told like right in the beginning of this podcast, then it started to be in a radical way, in a weird way, and the believe like how this happened. So what was the main core of being a witch? Someone thought that you're a witch, and they would probably just like have suspicious that you might have something in your own house. Maybe your crop died, and maybe your like husband died, or something, like a lot of death around you, or maybe something like this. And then people were like gossiping, and most of the time it led to a hysteria. And everyone could accuse you, your family members, your friends, neighbors, and even some random person who's walking around the street and he's like, oh, I guess she's a witch. Then people were brought to a trial, and most of the time during this trial, there was some certain evidence of being a witch. Most of the time, those were just some words, and people were accused. And then the persecutor would say something about this person, and then the defense would say something about this person as well. And then they will bring to the court some people, most of the time neighbors, and ask him like, what do you think? Is he or she a witch, or maybe not? And sometimes neighbors would say some random thing like, oh, we had a fight 10 years ago, and then I came home and I had diarrhea, or like my kid, he had fever, and I guess she's a witch because of that. But no one thought like whenever you have a fight with a neighbor or anyone else, you are a little bit stressed out, and that is the main reason why you might have diarrhea, which is pretty normal right now. And of course, in 14th century, no one talked about science. Science was something demonic as well, and those scientists, they were accused to be witches as well, and warlocks. I guess most of the time, warlocks were scientists, and that's why they were accused. But, on and off plague still was from the 14th to, I guess, 17th century. And one of the latest, I guess, one of the earliest plague that was happening was in 1466. It happened in Paris, and 40,000 people died. It was on and off during the 3 years, like from 1466 to 1469, I believe. And of course, that's why people believed in dark rituals, that the plague was caused by witches and whatsoever. Really nice stereotype for church because they still had a lot of power over people. And later in like maybe in 15th century or still late 14th century, when the trial was over and people were accused in being a witch or not being a witch, again, they were banished from the family and they had to leave all the possessions. Then maybe they would pay a fine, or in the worst cases, and those were rare cases, but still in the worst cases, so they were burned as a purification, and people, they did believe in fire as a pure, let's say, as a purification of your sins, as well as, I guess, certain accusations when people were tortured. Well, another really cool thing about trials is that whenever people were accused, sometimes another not even punishment, but how to get some information out of people, they were tortured, which is interesting because people will, I guess, confess under torture. Whenever you tell them, they will confess, because like tortures that were weird. One of the favorite, I guess, tortures that happened in like 14th or 15th centuries is purification with water or something like this. If they will get you underwater and they will put you there as long as you will tell them if you're a witch or not. Another really cool, let's say, torture, not even torture, but how to find a witch. If they will, I don't know, like throw you in water. So if you die, then you're not a witch. And if you're not died, then you're a witch and they will kill you. This is another really weird stereotype and really weird, I guess, torture that people believed in. And really interesting that society it wasn't like dumb, but they were super, they were not even stressed about this fact that people are witches. They were afraid of this afterlife, and that God will probably just punish them for not finding a witch and probably burning a witch. And that's why, of course, that led to paranoia. I guess witches were not only pictured in a way with the skin and rotten teeth, but most of the time when they believed that witch had some sexual, let's say, interaction with the devil, most of the time this was completely opposite version of a Christian, a religious Christian who would never have sex with not only devil but other men, though prostitution was widely spread back then. And honestly, I don't really think prostitutes were accused in witchcraft. But okay, let's not talk about this. Most of the time, the real problem happened when people not only believed in devil in this communication, but do you remember the broom? Whenever witches were flying, when they needed to get from one place to another, a broom was the sign. A lot of witches were indicated by a broom, let's say, that they will fly from one place to another. And honestly, a lot of people, like, there's a mixed belief that broom can be associated with a penis, and that this, like, a witch or woman would hop on the penis or this broom and then fly around. This was another link to devil and sex and whatsoever, because virgins had to get married, being virgin, and only then they will give birth to their child with their man, with their husband. And witches, they didn't really care about being married most of the time. That not all of them, but like most of the time, they will just have sex on and off here and there with anyone they could find. Another point, I guess, is sometimes brooms were indicated as something that people could find in their house. Basically, do you remember Hocus Pocus? When they couldn't find a broom, they used a vacuum cleaner. And vacuum cleaner is another great example that these brooms, this was the only tool that they could use in their house, and that's why they used brooms. It's not just because it was some sort of penis shape, anything like this. Mainly, I guess there are two different points of view. Some of them believe in penises, and some of them believe that it was just useful in their house. And that's why they used, let's say, brooms. When people found you're guilty, if you're still a witch, and after the trial, it not always led to death or burning or anything like that. Sometimes it was like shaming you, no one would speak to you, you would still pay some fine, or you would be banished from the society. So those were different. It's another really cool example when a guy who was accused of being a warlock, he didn't even try to defend himself in a court, and that's why he was accused of being a witch, and he faced the death penalty. And his death penalty was some stones, and he was lying underneath like numerous stones. And then some people say that when they asked for his last words, he said more stones, or like more something like this. And yeah, not always fire and hanging were as a death penalty. Another two really interesting examples back in the day, in maybe in the 14, I don't remember what age. I couldn't even find this information, but I guess I should check out this later on. Two of the names that actually led to a tremendous amount of victims of their word, let's say, those were Springer and Kramer. Both of these, I guess, jerks, they created Malleus Maleficarum. Malleus Maleficarum. And so this basically was a manuscript how to find a witch, among others. And due to this manuscript, they accused thousands of victims and thousands of people in witchcraft. And they didn't really care about, but they still mentioned that women were likely to be witches because they were emotionally unstable, and that is the main reason why it was really easy for a devil to find his way to their soul. And another one is Matthew Hopkins, who still was a jerk, and he accused a lot of other men and women in witchcraft. So basically, yeah, you can believe in whatever you want. I guess a lot of people think that church was initiating this witch hunt because of their own beliefs, but I do believe in plague and that it shook people's belief in God, in church itself. Not even in God, yeah, but in church. And that's why they found a way to protect themselves and to accuse someone but themselves and make people believe in God and in church again. But honestly, I have no idea what is true and what is not. I do believe that witches are not that scary anymore. People found their way out, I guess, late 17th century, because this was the beginning, the new era of science. And of course, it was really hard to tell people that now you have to kill women or men for witchcraft because they could find a scientific explanation to a certain, let's say, like a logical explanation to a certain situation, especially as a diarrhea. And I showed you this example, as well as some other rituals that people believed was something demonic, but then they realized that there is a scientific explanation and logical explanation to all of this, and that's why it stopped. I can't say I want to talk about Salem witches because it's a different story. Salem witches, they were more like 17th century. When Europe stopped this witch hunt, United States, not even United States, but like America back then in 17th century, started this witch hunt, and especially Salem's witches, they were burned alive, a lot of them, and because of some other jerks. And most of the reasons, I guess, I don't really want to, just like real quick, let's talk about this. Salem witches, they were accused, most of women were accused because they had to follow the strict instructions of their parents. A lot of young girls, they had to follow their parents. And when they didn't want to follow their instructions and they wanted a little bit of freedom, these girls were considered to be possessed because they were rebellious and they didn't want to follow some rules that were prescribed. And that is the main reason why it's caused this wave of like accusations. Not only these reasons, but one of the reasons was this was a problem. A little bit of freedom cost a lot of lives. And that is it, guys, for today. Today's podcast is not really long. It's short. It's really productive, I believe. And then let's talk maybe next time about plague, because I was fascinated with this topic. It's super, super cool. And let's just maybe dive into this a little bit more, because witch hunt is a cause. But let's talk about the reason of this cause. Okay, guys, and this is it for today's podcast. That's fine with me. I hope you enjoyed today's topic, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.